the system here, so it's up to me to talk until you're done. What we are going to discuss now is, first of all, what is a center like that? Because it's a new center, as you know. And maybe the most important question of this afternoon is, what does it mean? What does it do? And what can it mean for you? And you being here, first of all, means that you're interested in the whole idea, the whole concept, maybe of the concept of adaptation, but maybe also of the idea of others can answer questions for you on that topic. Because there may be people in the room that have something to offer on climate adaptation, but there may also be people in the room that have an ask, that have a demand, that want to learn something. And maybe to find that out before we continue, it is also, I think, good to know for the people that want to address you and want to talk with you. Who in this room thinks he or she or his or her organization is an expert or has something to offer in terms of adaptation? That looks good. That's close to half of the room. Is my assumption right that the other half of the room is interested in the concept and wants to learn something about it or has a specific ask on that? Same people, that's good, because that is part of the idea. Let me continue there. Who in this room is coming from the global north, as we call it? And who is coming from the other side, the global south? Whatever that concept may be, but people understand. That's also a good spread. That means we have people in the room, we have a good setup for a nice conversation here. And talk about the idea of adaptation, what it is and what we can mean for each other. I looked up the definition of adaptation. I thought, what actually is, what are we going to talk about? And the dictionary says it's a process of change by which an organism becomes better suited to its environment. Once again, it's a process of change by which an organism becomes better suited to its environment. Let me first single out one word, change. That means that you are moving into an unknown territory, or that you have to change into something else. Sometimes you know what to change into, but sometimes you don't. That in itself has the concept of learning and sharing of experiences in it. And I think Christian Wallet, who's sitting here in the front row, will address part of that to you, and we'll talk about that to you, and because that is, I think, the core of what the center is about. A second word that I would like to single out is environment, and that is the context in which this is all happening. And when you talk climate change, and that is for many of us here the field of expertise, or at least the space you work in, you know that is a field without any boundaries. The moment you think you're there, something else pops up, and climate has to do with whatever context or whatever theme or whatever profession you attach it to. So that environment, I think, is crucial to what we are talking about here. Third element that I would like to single out is the term organism. An organism, to me, it implies life, it implies growth. And that's another thing that is, I think, good to remember when we talk about adaptation, when we talk about the things that we want to develop here. This is a living organism, and I think we are close to the birth of it. So a lot to change and adapt here. But without further ado, I would like to give the floor to several people that have been involved and that will still be involved in the period to come, but also during the past close to a year, I think, during which we have seen the coming to life of, first of all, of the idea and the spread of partnerships and the other threats to people that want to be involved, that have something to offer, or, as we just found out, also have an ask from a center like this. First of all, I would like to ask Olga Pilifosova, our host of the UNFCCC, to, yes, please, to come forward and say something about why this is relevant to you. Thank you.
came directly from the supporting negotiations and try to say something, something intelligent. And if you don't mind, if I can see.
Please go ahead. As long as you use the mic.
I will try. This one.
I'll take it from back.
So maybe I can start with something that you obviously all know, being here in the UNFCCC conference, that the Paris Agreement firmly commits all parties to accelerate the adaptation actions and to ultimately meet that something is that is quite new, the global goal on adaptation to enhancing adaptive capacity, and maybe I will just read, strengthening resilience and reducing vulnerability to climate change. And it also adds with a view to contributing to sustainable development and ensuring an adequate adaptation response in the context of temperature goal of Article 2, which is, as you know, this 2 degrees and no more than 2 degrees and aiming at 1.5. So this task, as you read it, it already sounds like very complex scientific and technical task. And where the technical challenge, which is the contribution, is will be very important and needed. And this task has 2 aspects, actually. First, in order to achieve this goal, the countries and all countries are embarking in implementation and of adaptation actions. And in many countries, and especially developing countries, they require technical support and they require knowledge to knowledge sharing to plan and implement adaptation interventions. The technical input would be is also very important, and I can see in the room members of adaptation committee. They're also very important for the work of the institutions on adaptation under the UNFCCC. And you know that adaptation committee is the principal advisory body to help to support countries in their effort to enhance adaptation actions in the coherent manner. We also have the least developed country expert groups, which through its technical working group together with adaptation committee helping countries to develop their national adaptation plans. And all the tasks require the collaboration and the technical and scientific input. There's also a number of tasks that emerge from the Paris Agreement that related to assessment of the state of adaptation globally, and that require expert input and scientific, but also not only policy relevant thinking, but also they highly sort of the state of the art scientific thinking out of the box. Probably I would finish here, and in concluding, just to say that I'm really looking forward to learning about your plans in these 2 aspects. First, on how the supporting parties and other stakeholders in their adaptation efforts, and the second, what is needed for assessment of the state of the adaptation on the globally. So, and maybe also to recall that that Cancun, which happened to our conference in Cancun, that happened already, how many years ago? 8, 9? Yes, 7 years ago. That was a breakthrough for adaptation under the UNFCCC. Actually asked for International Center for Adaptation. I don't know how many of you remember about that. And of course, even though this center that you are presenting today is not a direct response to that a provision, it creates surely the global direction that leads to the expression of this need. So I would like to wish good luck for your work and stay relevant and specific. Thank you.
Thank you, yes. Stay relevant and specific. I think that's a very good encouragement for the rest of the afternoon, but also for the period that the center will be active. The second person I would like to invite is, contrary to what the sheet says here, is Musonda Mumba, UN Environment. Do you want to sit down as well? Or is it, please, yeah, because so the people in the back can see you as well.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Musonda Mumba. I work for UN Environment, and I'm part of the climate change adaptation team in Nairobi. For us, it's a great opportunity because we are one of the initiating partners of this initiative. And from UN Environment's perspective, obviously, this is a really welcome opportunity and welcome idea to really have a center of excellence that will bring together not just the work that's been done historically, but best practice, looking at investors, private sector, looking at policymakers, different actors, scientists, etc., to really be able to share what has worked, what is working. Back to your definition of adaptation, how are we adapting both global south, global north, and see how we can actually work collaboratively together. And I think people have to recall that UN Environment was also instrumental in setting up the Global Adaptation Network and also Provia, of which Adaptation Futures came out of that. And with that, you know, at the Adaptation Futures, the announcement in February 2017 was made for the center, which is really, really great and very exciting opportunity. So for us, we want to commit and want to say that we want to be dedicated to this process and certainly contributing to how the center sort of, you know, evolves and how it gets, you know, basically, how do we get the machinery? How do we get the, you know, the hub and spokes and oils and everything together? But I think there's a lot of experiences that are already manifesting here. So all I can say is that we want to play a part in working together and certainly identifying, you know, how we sort of moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That deserves a round of applause as well. I move on to the Netherlands, and the name that is written down there is correct, Christian Mallet. And you can perhaps tell us why you think this is important and perhaps why also the Netherlands is willing to step into this.
Which is kind of funny, since you are the climate envoy. But you've already said a thing or two about that, of course. I'll keep it short, as I'll be one of the presenters as well. But for the Netherlands, adaptation, of course, is of major importance. Has been so for centuries, with regard to us being, of which 80% of the GDP is generated below sea level. So adaptation to natural circumstances, especially when they are changing as rapidly as they are doing now, is of vital importance. We've put a lot of effort into organizing the Adaptation Futures Conference. So we were very glad when UN Environment asked us to stay involved and continue the way that we are approaching this concept of adaptation, which we now try to materialize in this concept of the Global Adaptation Center of Excellence.
Thank you, thank you. And you will see more of Christian just in a minute. May I ask you, Mr. Akio Takemoto, to tell us, you're most welcome to have a seat, please. The mic is still on, I think.
Okay, I tried to finish my presentation in 5 minutes. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank the organizer for inviting me to this side event today. My name is Akio Takemoto, Director of Climate Change Adaptation Office at Ministry of the Environment of Japan. So together with Netherlands and UNEP, and from Japan, National Institute of Environment Studies, NIES, will be funding organizations. And our ministry is going to strongly support global excellence on adaptation through National Institute of Environment Studies with our great excitement. And in Japan, the National Adaptation Plan was formulated as a cabinet decision in November 2015. as a cabinet decision. And now we are conducting our actions under this plan domestically and internationally. The core strategy of the NAP is mainstreaming adaptation into policies and measures in various sectors promoted by relevant ministries and agencies. When drafting the NAP, we refer to the report on climate change impact assessment produced by the Central Environment Council. And more than 50 scientists joined the assessment and in 57 sectors with common metrics on significance level, urgency level, and confidence level. And as a result, this report identified high climate risk sectors such as rice and fruit production, pest insects, floods, tidal waves, and heat stress. So now, for most high prioritized sectors, relevant ministries, which is Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, and others, have been enhancing measures to address the damages caused by climate impacts in Japan. However, since extreme climate events have been increased in number and strength across Japan recently, so these relevant ministries feel it difficult to cope with it. And besides, it is projected that climate change will cause much more severe damage to these sectors, and also will affect other sectors which now does not require adaptation actions. Yes, so therefore we need to enhance adaptation. A key success for mainstreaming is to provide scientific information on climate risk in the future. That will affect them as precise as possible, so that they are convinced of taking actions for adaptation and for adapting current and future risks. I think it's a universal concept, not only in Japan, but also to other countries. So now we are outreaching adaptation actions to local governments and private sectors. The most urgent support they need is to provide information on climate risk in local scales. For it happen in specific sectors such as special agricultural products and fish special to the local areas, and flood risks in the river basins in the local areas. So in order to promote these actions, MOEJ established Adaptation Information Platform in August last year. The APLAT provides data sets on future climate impacts in all prefectures, which are 47, and guidelines for adaptation planning for local governments, and good practices on adaptation actions taken by private sectors. Our ministry has also started actions to support by creating local adaptation consortium in 6 subnational areas to support projection of future climate impacts utilizing advanced modeling techniques in collaboration with other relevant ministries. Now I'd like to talk about international. At the COP22 in Marrakesh, Ministry of Environment of Japan Yamamoto announced to establish Asia-Pacific Adaptation Information Platform by 2020. The APPLAT has 3 essential functions to support developing countries in enhancing actions. It aims to provide data sets on climate risk, in particular in partner countries, both in national and local scales, and to provide toolkits for encouraging stakeholders to take actions, and to provide capacity building to government officials and experts. So currently, we are cooperating with partnering countries such as Indonesia, Mongolia, Fiji, Samoa, and Vanuatu for climate change impact assessment to be input to the APPLAT. And let me introduce our cooperation with Indonesia. Based on LOI with Indonesia government, and we have been supporting to mainstream national adaptation plans into local actions, local planning. Right now, we have 3 states in focus, that North Sumatra, East Java, and Bali states. And based on the demand-driven approach, we have producing climate risk information in specific sectors, such as projection on rice production, heat stress, is infection risk assessment in urban settlement. And we also started cooperation with Asian Development Bank in mining climate risk data, the various ADB projects, whose data will also be provided to the platform. By developing data set of climate risk information to regional, national, and subnational scales in the Asian Pacific region, it enables countries, communities, and private sectors to make appropriate decision and action towards adaptation and sustainable development. Lastly, we believe that our concept of AP Plat will perfectly fit the vision of Global Center of Excellence on Adaptation, which is to guide, mentor, facilitate, and enable work towards a climate resilient world by signposting excellence. By creating diverse partnership through GCECA at scale, we'd like to support those that struggle to put climate adaptation effectively into practice across public and private sectors and create win-win relationship whoever get involved in the partnership. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Takemoto. I said at the beginning, this is going to be a conversation with you. So far, I haven't lived up to that promise because you have heard several statements from this side of the room. Bear with me for a little bit because there's one more to come. But that one is answering, I hope, many of your questions because we have heard many things already about countries involved in planning for adaptation. We have heard about countries having experience. I've heard the term partnership fall several times, also financing of the efforts. We have heard organizations why this is important, where it actually came from, and how also the UN organizations are preparing themselves, also first of all to help the center and being involved in the center, but also to move forward on the topic. I hope one of your questions is, but what is it, this center? Well, for that reason, we have invited Christian Ballet, who you know by now, and he is going to explain to us what the center is going to look like, what it can mean for us, for you, and how you can get involved. Isn't that right?
That's exactly what I'm trying to do. So, accelerating adaptation towards a global center of excellence on climate adaptation. So at the end of this year, we aim to launch. My name is Christian Mallet. I've been in charge of the Adaptation Futures conference, and now I'm responsible for setting up this new center until it's launched. I'd like to touch briefly upon a few issues regarding background, challenges, demands, scope, activities, organization, governance, and planning, and hope to keep it relatively short. Of course, the background of all of this are the global commitments where adaptation has played a very significant role in. Part of the background also is the Adaptation Futures Conference, which has clearly showed us that this graph here has been made by Richard Klein's Stockholm Environment Institute based on the 160 session reports of the Adaptation Futures Conference, that adaptation is a very complex matter. It's about everything and it's about everyone. But we have to deal with that complexity. We have to embrace it, break it down, and try to bring it into practice, because there's no other way of doing it. Two quotes expressing very high-level commitment to this endeavor here. Our minister says failing of dealing adequately with climate change will increase damage from a multitude of risks, such as natural disasters, social, economic disruptions, increasing political tensions. Many people are looking for good practices and guidance with regard to climate change adaptation. Ms. Espinosa, the new Executive Secretary of UNFCCC, said the effective engagement of all stakeholders, and the management of knowledge for adaptation. She doesn't say new knowledge, she says the management of knowledge for adaptation is vital in supporting adaptation activities by providing these elements and developing guidance. The center will accelerate climate adaptation and greatly contribute to the effective planning and implementation of the national adaptation climate plans. So during Adaptation Futures 2016, we engaged a big variety of stakeholders, and we are convinced that we need to serve these 6 groups of stakeholders as our potential end users, but also as potential partners of the center, and this from around the globe, of course. So we're talking about international organizations, NGOs, business, knowledge, governments, both national, regional, local, and finance. We've talked to dozens and dozens of people after the conference, because during the conference there were 1,800 people from over 100 different countries representing numerous organizations. By then it sounded like quite a rather silly idea to create a new center. So what could a new center add to all of to the existing landscape? What we heard is that there are 2 main challenges that are yet not taken very well care of. So the first one is, what is effective adaptation? And if we do find examples of effective adaptation, how can we scale up this effective adaptation? In other words, there's a big dilemma here. You could say that the adaptation dilemma is that we urgently need to scale up effective adaptation, but that no one really knows what effective adaptation is. There's a lot of commitment for doing this. On the left-hand side, you recognize this gentleman, who is Marcel Beukema, our climate envoy, holding a statement of intent here, signed by the Global Environment Facility, UN Environment, Delta Alliance, Acclimatize, the Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency, and the city of Rotterdam. And after that also the government of Japan, represented by its National Institute for Environmental Studies, has joined. And this is a group photo including representatives of a lot of countries and other organizations, including NGOs, just showing you the broad support for this. So what is our line of thinking? Well, our starting point are the global commitments. In all of these 5 treaties, adaptation plays a very vital role. And of course, the trick now is to translate this into strategies, plans, not only from national governments, but all of the 6 groups of stakeholders and the variety within those groups of stakeholders are all very, very, very much dedicated to making it happen. So we're talking here about enabling steps. Of course, we all have the intention to come from these enabling steps to a phase in which we have actual projects and investments and actions on any level. And we have the intention that these actions lead to developments, that there's output, but not only output, but that there is also a link between what we are doing and the goals that we have set ourselves to do. So far the theory. Now the practice. 2 enormous challenges here, and I hope you do recognize them, otherwise we'd like to hear from you, of course. The first one is how to come from 2 to 3. How to use the enormous political attention and priority for adaptation, partly translated into vast amounts of money that are available to be spent on adaptation. But why do we not succeed in bringing these, in translating this enormous amount of attention into practice? It's very hard to create action. And the other one is, of course, there are resulting developments, and we are trying to speed up this process. But how do we manage the direction of the developments? How do we make sure that in the end they do lead to the commitments that we have all set ourselves to do? This is what the Global Center intends to do. It intends to accelerate this policy cycle, first to make it more mature, so we can learn from each and every of the phase. So not only look at the legitimacy of the money being spent, but also look at the effectiveness of the projects that are being undertaken to understand what works, what doesn't, and from there, try to accelerate this. With partners, we will stay a relatively small center, but in each of the steps, we will look for partners to cooperate with. So far, we have close to 100 different organizations who have reached out to us and expressed their interest in partnering. So coming back to the two big challenges, what do we intend to do about it? So what is effective climate adaptation? There's a big need for excellence, for good stories, for narratives that integrate different interests of different stakeholders. And we need to scale up climate adaptation. That's the acceleration part. On the excellence side, we need to signpost existing excellence. We need to develop excellence where there is none. We need to review practices and draw lessons from them. What worked, what didn't work. And we need to continue to convene like we did during Adaptation Futures. By we, I don't mean the Netherlands, but there was an enormous variety of organizations involved in the conference. We need to work across domains, across spatial scales, across time scales, engaging all stakeholders. We will contribute to guidance and knowledge management. For example, we need to produce good practice materials and share them based on specific experience in collaboration with UNFCCC technology mechanism, among which the CTCN, of course. On the accelerate side of it, advocate excellence, support capacity building. Again, signposting, developing, review, and convening. We need to monitor and evaluate adaptation practice. We need to look into making outlooks. We are currently working on preparing an adaptation outlook together with UN Environment and the UNDTU partnership. We need to create awareness, leadership, and partnerships. And this will be used, for example, during the Adaptation Futures Conference series. There was a series, the 4th was in Rotterdam last year, and the 5th will be in Cape Town in June next year. Now, a quick word on what the organization may look like. One of the central pieces, what we intend to do is making an annual global adaptation agenda. Because when you know where the excellence is, you can also recognize the burning issues that need to be tackled. So from there, we will have a rolling working program being adaptable to the needs of the network. As we speak, we are preparing work, for example, in Colombia and several other countries to try and start finding out what works. What kind of methods we should use. And with me, I mean the SEN. Undertaking self-funded programs in this year and the next year, issuing calls for work and advocacy to invite others to undertake or commission work, but always in respect to this global adaptation agenda. So we invite you as professionals to look at this adaptation agenda, and the first version will be issued this year. Look at it and look to what extent it is a basis for your work to be redirected. And Marcel, I'd like to share these two rather open questions with the audience, open for discussion, because we are here to learn where the needs are. This is our story based on a lot of conversation, but we will only be successful, the center, if it adds value to your practice. So what is the most vulnerable service the center could offer to you? What kind of opportunities for collaboration do you see with your organization or your initiative? Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. This gives a rough idea of what the center is going to look like. Perhaps, and I'm actually sure, that leaves all kinds of questions with you as well. The two that were there, perhaps you can bring them back, Christian, these two. Are of course a good starter for discussion. These are questions to you. But what you also hear from Christian is, and I think also from the other people that introduced themselves to you, is not all answers are there. Perhaps there are even more questions than answers at this moment. So what we're going to do now, and I showed you this little box here already. The first one who dares, I'll throw this mic to. But what you will also see is that some of the questions that you may have, there won't be any answers here around. So it could very well be that people like Christian say, we're going to write that one down because that's an important one. We have to work it out. What you also saw is that a lot of thinking has gone into this already. And Christian said he has spoken and they have spoken to over 100 people. So a lot of knowledge is there already. It's also about the dissemination of that knowledge. But let me start by asking you the first question. Anyone here has an idea of what kind of service you would be looking for when it comes to climate adaptation? I give it to you. Please
Thanks.
stand up and say your name.
So my name is Sarah Kupka. I'm from the Network of Regional Governments for Sustainable Development. And we actually have an initiative on climate change adaptation with regional governments. And what we've noticed is that a lot of them are in need of some kind of guidelines to develop adaptation strategies and plans. Yeah, this would be a valuable service that you can offer to us, because we have some members who already have advanced plans, but others are still looking for some guidelines, some guidance on this.
And if you hold the mic, can I ask you also what kind of opportunities for collaboration do you see? Would your organization be interested in joining up in one form or another?
Of course we are. So what kind of opportunities for collaboration? So in our initiative, the members share a lot of practices, good practices, challenges. So maybe with these, and we also the members also report on their adaptation strategies if they have some. So we produce a report based on this every year. We launched the first one this year. So maybe we could use this information to give input also to you.
I think that's what it's all about. Thank you. Next person. Wow, yeah, that's a challenge. It's a pity as well that you weren't going to bring it. You bring it. No, I saw someone in the back, so it's someone may get hurt. Please state your name.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we are far in back. My name is Fakri Karim. I'm from UNCDF. 5-6 years ago, we worked together with LDC to develop a mechanism to allow a national government to transfer the funds to local government through the existing fiscal transfer system for climate change adaptation. So that's mechanism allow local government to do activity based on their mandate on the adaptation. So this program is running now. It's running in 12 LDCs. And my question here, how that lesson learned we have in this different country can be used in this Center of Excellence, and what kind of platform we can use to be a part of this. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a question, Christian, that you could perhaps answer.
Well, it will be a pleasure to meet you afterwards and look for a way of sharing your lessons learned and try to disseminate them through within the network. Because that's absolutely one service that we would like to provide, is to draw lessons or collect existing lessons and look for ways to disseminate them within the network.
Thank you, that's clear. I see the box is being passed on. Please,
hello.
Please stand up.
Hello, my name is Mona from Egypt. I'm in Ministry of Transport. I think the most important thing is that the knowledge from the Center of Excellency how it's transferred to the developing country to create their own. It's not with the guidelines, okay, but I know the knowledge is very important, and I think these centers include many experience in many sectors. What are these sectors? Maybe aviation, transport, energy. It's lots of sectors, and this is the basis. How it could transfer all this experience to the countries. This is, I think, these are very crucial things.
I think these are actually
Thank
two
you.
very crucial questions that you ask.
you.
First of all, the kind of focus that the center may have, and the way of disseminating the information that may be generated or that is available in countries and in projects and in programs like in the back. Maybe you would like to add something to this as well?
Thanks. Of course, in the room there are more people closely involved in this. Perhaps I can take the opportunity to introduce some of them. But I'll first answer your question, but then I'd like to, because now it looks like I'm the only one involved in thinking about this and about the center. It's absolutely not the case, of course. So what sectors we need to define and decide on the specific sectors that we will look on. We are now thinking of focusing on deltas, including the urban region of deltas, the energy, food, water nexus, and transport and infrastructure. That's a whole lot to start with. And if we can succeed in those years, then perhaps afterwards we can try and do even more. Ways of disseminating. There are numerous ways of doing that, and we'd like to speak of the center that we will create. One is a physical presence, an office somewhere in the Netherlands, which could become one of the central adaptation hubs, and everyone is invited to come there, and coffee, Wi-Fi, and the toilet is on us. And if you feel like you're an adaptation expert, you're most welcome to share an office with us for free. So that's an offer. And the other one is the center as a network, because over half of the employees, their sole task will be to manage the network. Massive open online courses, webinars, preparing adaptation futures, things like that. So very active network management. And the first and the third one is actually connected to that is the online presence of the center, being, for example, perhaps the adaptation yellow pages, or really a place where you can find signposted excellence. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Thanks.
Can I introduce some friends in the audience? No. You get it back within a minute. I don't want to. I don't want to exclude anyone, but of course, can I introduce Renske Peters to you? She's a member of the Adaptation Committee, Director of Delta Alliance, an international group of knowledge institutes, 17 wings in a dozen countries. 17 countries, all working on adaptation in Delta circumstances. And on board is also Richard Klein from Stockholm Environment Institute. Arnoud Veit from the World Meteorological Organization is on board as well. Do I miss any inner city? From the Global Environment Facility is on board as well. Perhaps you can introduce yourself later. And Connie Huizinga from the Sloket Partnership on Sustainable Transport.
That is very good. So now we all know that you're here, so you can't hide anymore. Let me start with you. Katja, you were introduced as coming from the Global Environment Facility or Fund. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about why you think this is an important initiative and how it could benefit you. Please come.
Hi, I'm Katja Kwang Idba. I work with the Adaptation Program with the Global Environment Facility. Just to give kind of a brief overview of the GEF's involvement with the center, and also provide an example for how other organizations could be involved. We provide in-kind support, and the reason we got involved was because the GEF administers 2 adaptation funds, the LDCF and the SCCF. So we have unparalleled experience in financing for adaptation, and we contribute from our long experience in adaptation, existing partnerships, and our unique position. And we have a portfolio of over 300 adaptation projects worth more than 1.5 billion. And we've supported 51 countries in identifying and addressing urgent adaptation needs through NAPA formulation. And we're also supporting NAPs in country. So within this context, the GEF is obviously keenly interested in supporting increased understanding on maximizing the return on investment for every dollar spent in adaptation. And we really recognize the importance of cross-linking the GEF's experience in adaptation with existing global knowledge and experience base. And we fully support the center in its aim to develop tools and methodologies to achieve excellence in adaptation so as to help mobilize increased investment and bring down the high transaction costs for relevant technical work that's required for new adaptation projects and actions. So that's why we got involved, just as a brief overview.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Maybe someone wants to follow up on this one, because you touched upon several issues here, amongst others, the financing of these efforts or the direction of finance in this field. Anyone? I'm going to throw you the box. Good catch.
Thank you. Yes, well, we are one of the financial institutions. My name is Carl Kronenberg. I work for the EBRD. Yes, that's a follow-up. I was asking myself another question, and that's more for, it's not what, but I would say when would the center most valuable for us? And I think there is quite a strong need of a, let's call it a more policy-neutral institute that is taking away the policy, working on fact-based information that is being shared. And I can give you one example. We have, of course, bankers in our team, and we want to have the bankers to make the project as good as possible. And of course, I'm in the MRV team. I'm working very hard to convince the bankers how they should do it. But sometimes it helps a little bit more if there is an outside party that has a certain status, that has a certain authority, so we can share the data from them. It's, for instance, also we use a bit the same, the International Energy Agency. We use data from them, their scenarios. They're quite, let's call it neutral for our bankers, so we can convince them to look at them and use these data for their assessments of project. So in that, if the center would develop in such a direction, it would be very valuable for us.
Would that mean for you that the center also develops its own data and its own knowledge, or it should give a stamp of approval for it?
It's more that you do assess data, of course, but you don't develop them yourself. I think there are many people around that develop data. There are also many standards around, but it would be good to have a certain, if you have an annual report where you basically write it down, you give an overview what is available, and maybe also based upon the knowledge in the team, what are interesting developments, what are relevant developments, what are state-of-the-art development and standards that can be applied.
Okay, thank you for that. Maybe you can throw your mic to Richard Klein here, because now we are touching upon how you assess data, how you, because you did so, and Christian alluded to that. You did a report on adaptation futures, trying to do exactly what you were proposing here, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Thanks. My name is Richard Klein. I'm with the Stockholm Environment Institute, and we were working with the Netherlands government, trying to digest some of the results and findings of adaptation futures in a series of publications. And one of those was a report that outlines research priorities for adaptation. Now, we're not the first ones to outline research priorities or a research agenda for adaptation, but this one I think is different in that it specifically looks at research will help to address or to come up with adaptation solutions. We've done a lot of research, we as in the research community, trying to understand what the problem is. We need to invest a lot more effort into trying to understand and scale up the solutions. And in a way that also allows me to respond briefly to these questions. One of the points you made in your presentation, Christian, was that the center, the issue of excellence, it's not just that the center will bring together and rely on existing excellence, the center is also going to build excellence. And I think that's particularly important given the current demand for adaptation action, and the fact that if we look back at the most recent IPCC report, the fifth assessment report, its assessment of adaptation was very much restricted by the lack of empirical information on adaptation, because we simply don't have much knowledge of how adaptation actually happens, because adaptation action still is very much in its early phase. Now, what I'm really hoping is that the center is not only going to stimulate adaptation action and thereby increase the pool of empirical information, but is also going to allow the research community and others to analyze that, to do research on that adaptation process, to then better inform what actually works and what doesn't work. And the timing is good because the IPCC will be working on its sixth assessment report. There was a scoping meeting in Ethiopia not long ago that has come up with a draft outline on how impacts and adaptation will be assessed in a report that will come out in 2022 or 2023. And clearly one step that can be made in the next assessment report is the kind of knowledge that hopefully the center will help to develop. And on a final note, as representative of the Stockholm Environment Institute, we are very much we're very excited about the initiative and very keen to work together with the center, and hopefully many will join us.
Thank you. Thanks. Several hands in the back. Shall I try? There you go.
I was a goalkeeper when I was young. Thank you. When I was looking this schedule in the side event, I feel happy because I'm from Ethiopia. For Ethiopia, you know what the impact of climate change and to build the resilient economy for countries like we is very vital. But when I was looking the name, Global Center for Excellence on Climate Adaptation, I think to upgrade the center into, or to let it Center of Excellence, there should be different centers who are working on the adaptation actions. If so, the first thing that should be done by this institution is to have a common consultation with different centers. And if it's a center of excellence, it has to be focused on those strategic issues, policy directions, and others. So do you approach in that way or not? In addition, regarding to these two questions, I think it's good for us. And I don't believe the Center of Excellence will have a direct communication with different parties in exchanging of experiences or lesson sharing, because it's Center of Excellence. So if so, the one who recommend on experience sharing, challenges, problems has to be shared to the Center of Excellence. But there should be different centers who has to work closely with parties, and this Center of Excellence has to coordinate and provide strategic and policy issues to different climate adaptation centers. Thank you.
A question in return. You say you come from Ethiopia?
Yes.
Would it help you if you had a question on an adaptation issue, if the center would be close by, or whether you had to send an email or a question to the other side of the world?
Sorry?
Is the proximity of the center, is that an asset to you? Does it matter whether it's close by or whether it is far away?
No, wherever it is, the existing technology will let us to share every information. But what I'm saying, not geographically near or far. It is center of excellence.
Yeah.
So it has to be focused on those strategic issues on adaptation worldwide level. So there should be different centers who have to be working closely with different countries or parties. That's why what I'm recommending, not the closeness and the far of the center to the country.
Okay. I think there might be reactions to this in the room. If not, could you pass the mic to your back neighbor? Because I saw your hand going up, right? Oh, yes.
Clearly, I can't be a goalkeeper. My name is Edith Ofona-Adera. I work with IDRC, which is a Canadian funding agency. We fund research in the Global South. So we work a lot with some of the thought leaders in the Global South to generate research evidence that supports adaptation. Thank you very much for this opportunity to actually learn about the center. I've heard about the center, and this has been a good opportunity to see what your vision is and where you're going with this. Just to pick on a point raised by the Ethiopian, I think I agree with him on a form of decentralization to centers of excellence that could focus on some key strategic issues and that could specialize on those strategic issues while you have a network sort of excellence. 2 points that I wanted to raise, actually 3 points related to the questions that you've put up in terms of areas of collaboration. Let me start with areas of collaboration. Some of the work that we do, we actually work with sort of like very leading edge kind of researchers in the Global South, where we have research-based evidence that could input into the work that you're doing. Secondly, we have a suite of adaptation options that have been tried and tested in the field. We've been working in the area of adaptation for about over 11 years. So these are adaptation options that we've tested, and we've come up with a catalog that could also be a useful area of collaboration. We would definitely have an interest in working with you. In terms of what the center can offer, I think if you look at the negotiations, if you look at the commitment from different countries to actually implement issues on the ground, there's a lot of need to actually have evidence-based work that can actually inform, for example, NDCs. A number of countries are implementing that, NAPs, as well as the low emission strategies that countries are developing. So a lot of that kind of evidence needs to go into informing that. It could be tools, it could be guidelines, but I also think that there's need to look at what can guide the implementation. The final one is, I liked your question about what is effective adaptation. I think we need to look at metrics in terms of how do you measure that? How do you talk about impact? And how do you do that from a rigorous perspective, especially if you're talking about a center of excellence? Thank you very much.
Thank you. These are very relevant points, I think. Not necessarily warrant a reaction, but if there are people in the room that do want to react. But before you pass on the mic, I have a return question as well. Given your experience in research, the beauty of knowledge is that you can copy it endlessly. Once a concept is thought up, you can share it and use it again. But there's another thing that is, especially to academic knowledge, not all academics are necessarily eager to share it without any cost, or because that is sometimes the structure of the generation of knowledge. Is there anything in your experience that says, well, perhaps you have to think about that, or be careful with that, or don't expect all kinds of new innovations to be shared widely and freely? Could you react to that?
Thank you. I think from our experience, given that we are a public agency, actually, the research that we fund is not only to contribute to the literature and to the body of knowledge, but to also be used to inform policy and practice. So that's something that we push for. So more of an applied research. And there is a lot of evidence that it has made a difference. While researchers may not be the best in communicating their outcomes, because they work in a multi-stakeholder process and involve the people they need to influence from the beginning, you do have uptake. I think the last point that I want to make is to do with scale. One of the areas that I think the center really needs to focus on, and I think you mentioned, is where things have worked. Can we then look at what are the pathways of actually taking it to scale and sustaining it over a larger scale? I think those are some of the fundamental issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Was the mic passed for? Otherwise, I stop here for one moment to ask you, Ayman, for the perspective of Morocco, maybe as a chair of the climate negotiations, but also maybe specifically from your point of view as a Moroccan.
Certainly. So from both, actually, both those perspectives happen to be very aligned. As both the party and the COP22 CMA1 and CMP12 presidency, we are very happy and impressed by this initiative. We are thankful for the founding partners, the government of the Netherlands, of Japan, and UN Environment, and all the other stakeholders that were involved in this. One of the reasons why we're impressed is we often hear about participatory approach, multi-stakeholder approaches, and I think in this case, you are demonstrating it by doing it far ahead of the launch, by proactively engaging with all manners of stakeholders. You are showcasing that it is the right way to talk about adaptation. When it comes to why I believe it's timely is that we happen to be in a context where it's very important to project trust and confidence. And I think this type of initiatives strongly do so, in particular in a topic such as adaptation, where there are strong expectations, strong needs. And this particular center will be a very important way to be able to answer to those needs in a contextualized, country-driven way, relying on the existing base of knowledge, as well as encouraging further potential partnerships and knowledge development. Now, when it comes to the sorry, I had a note here and I wanted to finish on. Yeah, I think we hear of naming and shaming a bit too often. I think it's also important to name and fame, to identify the best practices we have, to put them forward, and to enable scaling up. Now, scaling up when it comes to adaptation is not easy. We all know that it's very contextualized, but that's not a reason why it's not possible. And I think through the Global Center of Excellence on Adaptation, you'll be able to identify ways where scaling up can be regionally or even perhaps on a global level possible. And finally, I quite like the idea of networks. And I think beyond networks, it's important to build effective partnerships. And to that context, I think the comment that was made by Ethiopia is a very interesting way that we can build more concrete partnerships among all kinds of stakeholders that will be very interested in contributing to that process. And I think the attendance that you have in this room at this pretty late hour is a good example and showcases the level of interest there is for the center. And I once again congratulate you.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And in the meantime, I think the mic is passed on to... Yes. Does that imply a question from you? Now you stand up. Please go ahead.
I'll be very brief. My name is Marie Rossetti. I work for GIZ. I'm based in Thailand. We're supporting the government in the implementation or in the development of the NAP. And I just wanted to emphasize what the colleague over there from Canada just mentioned on the metrics. We really feel that this is one of the biggest challenge in the adaptation field, to really know what we are tracking and with what kind of indicators at the global, at the regional or the national scales. And this is a real challenge for countries that have been engaged in developing their national adaptation plan. And there are not a lot of experts out there that work on these questions. So it's really still a little club of people who work on adaptation metrics, indicator systems. And even in developed countries, this is a challenge. So I think this could really be one of the strategic areas of the center, if I may suggest. Also, what could be relevant, what I was thinking, hearing the different questions, regional expertise. So maybe thinking about having under regional centers where where people, national governments can actually address someone who is also working on data at the regional level. Finally, on the data issue, I also think the challenge is not about gathering or collecting the data. Usually governments have a lot of data, but it's more on analyzing it through the climate risk lens and understanding for individual sectors what is the additional risk that they're facing because of climate change, and then incorporate it in their development planning and the country planning in the end.
Thank you. For someone who got the mic by accident, you have a very coherent plea. It's maybe I'm going to do that more often. But you want to react to the metrics point, yeah?
Yeah, on the metrics element, you might have heard that last year as COP22 presidency, we hosted a conference specifically on adaptation metrics in September in Rabat. If you haven't, I invite you to look up the submission that Morocco made at the time before COP22 for adaptation communication. And what submission, I think, was the first time a party ever did that, constituted solely in a report on the conference as a signal that we were sending that it's very important to capture the outputs from the scientific community and the practitioner to feed into the process in terms of adaptation and metrics. And as presidency, we are still committed to continue working on the metrics because we strongly agree with you on that. It's very important to unlock the levels of financing that are needed in terms of adaptation effort, but also in terms of getting more visibility both at the local, at a regional, and at that aggregate level. Thank you.
Thank you. Duly noted. So,
can I actually still, since have the,
sure, this is supposed to be a dialogue.
Ask one more question, because so you. How this center could look like, what could be areas that or topics that you will focus on. What about the means for that? I don't want to talk necessarily about numbers, but just that we haven't, as potential future collaboration, we have an idea of what we're talking about in terms of means and implementation mode.
Maybe I didn't tell you, but no one can leave the room without signing a check. I don't know, because it looks like all the questions come from the back of the room now. If you here in front think you want to engage in a discussion, please do so. I still have one in the back, so please go ahead.
Well, thank you. My name is Luc Nyankaya. I'm from Benin, supporting the local climate adaptive living facility. One question. Excellence is also learning the right lessons from failures. Welcome.
I think I shouldn't necessarily answer that, but this is a very relevant point. If you are entering the unknown, you don't know all the answers, so you should get into making mistakes because those are the best ways to learn. And it's indeed, you have to capture what you learn, you have to measure what's happening. So all these things are very relevant. What I think is also necessary and imperative almost is to kind of capture what you do and what kind of lessons you learn and share those again. And I think you alluded to that in your presentation as well. That is indeed what is the idea of the center. But it's not necessarily the case that people in the center are doing that. Within the network, it should be there should be means to share those lessons and to pick up what kind of questions are around and link those to the experience that exists. So that is indeed the organism that we spoke about earlier. That is what it's going to be. So with this point and the other points, all things are noted here to take up in the process that comes from now until the I hopefully launch at COP23. I'm looking at you as well, Arnoud. Your institution is, of course, very much involved in measuring, disseminating of that information. And what is it that got you involved in this center that is being founded at the moment?
Okay, yes, my affiliation is with the Dutch Met Office, but I can say that the World Meteorological Organization, so the UN agency on meteorology and weather and climate, is a close partner to, and that's for good reasons, because the WMO is a network of all the ministries of on weather and climate of all over the world, and we try to support all kinds of with projects in climate adaptation all over the world. And we find that often the difficulties in the governance structure that we have to deal with various ministries within an area, and that, well, if the cooperation is right, then the money isn't spent effectively. The same kernel of information could be used by various partners also in a region, and that not happens always. So we're very willing to learn on how to make better use of governance structures, etc., better governance, so that we can make our projects more effective. So that's why.
Okay, thank you. The point of governance, I think we could get back to that one as well. But in the meantime, the catch box has been passed forward without hurting anyone, so please go ahead.
Yeah, if you allow me, just my name is Bachira, and Environment Climate Change from Mongolia. I would like to call back remarks made colleague from Stockholm, who said that center will not just bring excellencies, but create excellencies. It's a very important message, because my understanding that center will not just bring knowledge to countries or finished product, but assist countries to create own knowledge. Why? Because, for example, in Mongolia, we are implementing adaptation project based on ecosystem approach. Why? Because in Mongolia, most of ecosystems, primary ecosystems, not man-made, and therefore, for us, it is a very good chance to implement adaptation project with minimum expenditure. Because, for example, Mongolia industry said that for adaptation we need more than $3 billion US. It is a very big money for a small country like Mongolia, and if we can of ecosystem the potential, we can minimize adaptation exercise, which very very expensive, and then the central exchange will assist countries in that way. Thank you.
Okay, so that you said assistance also in the planning of adaptation. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Renske, you would like to say something?
Well, it's good to introduce myself with different hats, because one is the member of an adaptation committee, and I think being a member of the adaptation committee are very aware of the urgency for adaptation. We see on all sides that support is needed, and then of course we're always talking about what priorities, but I think one of the main important things is that it's accessible for people, because there are many reports and often there is a lot of knowledge, but make it accessible for people working on the ground. That's one thing. And the other one is also the whole governance, because we are talking how to plan it, how to manage it. And I think then it's not enough, and then they are talking about the ways in the how to disseminate your knowledge. Then it is necessary to have a very intensive contact also with the country to bring this process, to start this process, and to know the context. So I think that's important, and we see also there's a lot of platforms and other things, and of course you can't manage it, but join forces where it is possible, because there is a lot of knowledge, but we can make it better to bring it together, and that we get a real community of that. Another hat is my Delta Alliance, to connect different deltas together, and then also we are aware there is a lot of knowledge, and you have also to enhance the knowledge in that areas. I think that's also important, not only in the different institutes, but for example in the delta of Bangladesh or the delta of the Mekong or somewhere else. Because when there also are communities of knowledge, you can join forces also in that areas. And I think also for the global center, it is important to be global. It is now, the establishment will be in the Netherlands, but I think we need a kind of experts all around the world to answer the questions, the needs there are. And I think we must be well aware of that point. So I'm also in the preparatory group of the Global Center, because I believe when we join that forces, then we have a very good overview where the experts are and how we can reach each other. Then we can make a strong center. And that's also the reason that they say, well, with Delta Lines, I'm coming close to the center, and maybe I'm coming into the center, because then we can make the best of all together. So I have here prayer to work together and to center also strong.
Well, that last point, I think, is very concrete, and thank you for that, and thank you for your willingness to look into that. I think you also address another very important point here, and that is, what kind of adaptation are we talking about here? In other words, whose needs are we trying to address? And if you really look into this, you of course talk about the local farmer or the local entrepreneur, or who else is being threatened by sometimes weather events or other events coming from climate change. Ideas how to articulate those demands, those questions. How do we get to the farmer? How does this farmer in the end know there is something like a global center of excellence that might help him?
Well, I think in different ways, but of course there will be not a question of a farmer to the center, but I think when we have different moderators, you must be well aware we are going into a country or a region. Who are the key players, and where is the energy to bring it further on? And I think it is especially the interrelationship between the one who to support and the ownership of the country or region itself. So they have to do it and to make ownership of it, because then I think it must be successful also for the farmer on the ground. And you need, like somebody else in the whole setting, you need also the evidence-based research. You have to know what is underground. And of course, the center is not for every question, but you have to feeling for it. You have to bring it also in your guidelines or webinars or other things you want to organize. But you need it, top and at the bottom and bottom to up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please pass it on first to UN Environment. Here. No, take the box, otherwise other people start talking.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
Because you must have experience with that.
Indeed. Very quickly, I think I just want to say, from a UN Environment perspective, we've obviously been involved in a lot of adaptation-related work. I mean, similar to sort of the connections of the GEF work, etc., and other bilateral funding. But what I also want to add is that I think, I mean, from our perspective, the center really almost has a hub and spoke dynamic, because we are aware of existence of a lot of amazing initiatives. Panorama, GIZ, that is gathering quite amazing, exciting methods, tools, name it, etc. Similarly, let's talk about the Carrier Initiative, I think, because I sit on the Science and Policy Advisory Committee. They're doing incredible research on data systems and really state-of-the-art kind of research. But the point I'm trying to say here is that the center plays that role where it's obviously bringing in all these different elements for people to know where they can find the information. I think, in my personal opinion, as a climate change adaptation person, I would not envisage that the center is going to host and house all the science that everybody has to go and get that. You have to be able to say, well, we are the center that provides you information, go and speak to so, and be able to find this information, and they're doing this kind of research, etc., because your computers will crash. That would be the reality. You'll be overloaded, totally overloaded and overwhelmed. And there's only so much work you can do within, you know, not even a 24-hour day, an 8-hour day, really. So ideally, I think we're trying to get a lot of conversation going, because adaptation in itself is incredibly dynamic and it's experiential. And as the counterpart said at the back, it's also experimental. Yep. We really don't know what tomorrow will be. Yep. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you.
Great.
Duly noted as well. You want to throw, isn't it?
Yes.
Throw it to the gentleman over there.
Oh, there's a lady next to you as well.
There you go. Thank you.
We did well. Thank you. Yeah, I've been listening while typing away that because I have many things to do, but it is very interesting to hear the discussion. And I think that there's a lot of great stuff
Please
coming
talk,
out.
talk into the box. There's a mic in there.
There's a lot of great stuff coming out of the discussion in terms of the overall functions of the center. When we speak about mitigation, we talk about the need to put the sectors at the center of the discussion. And I think that I would like to caution that if we stay at the general level, we will not see the change on the ground. Like ultimately, change on the ground is not being done by generalists, but change on the ground in terms of adaptation is also being done by sector specialists. So I think that in setting up the center, I think the challenge will be to find a sweet spot between the general philosophy of the center and to have the actual sectoral communities involved who will have to deliver on this. Because ultimately, if we look within the UNFCCC process, what we were talking about from transport in a previous side event, we are basically operating at a ratio of about 3-to-1. We have 3 times as much money for mitigation. We have 3 times as much coverage in NDCs for mitigation, etc. And by that, we are not even satisfied with that. So the challenge is, how do we ensure that we are not staying at the generic conceptual level and have a beautiful philosophy on adaptation, but that we are not delivering the goods? So that's the...
That's a good question. Do you have a beginning of an answer as well?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, please be involved. You know how to find the people at the center.
Yes, we are, and we are
there
actively working.
Could you pass it on to your neighbor? Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, thank you. My name is Fedis van der Plaat, also with the UN Environment here in Bondo. I think my question or my comment is a bit related to my neighbor. It's a very interesting discussion. I keep on thinking, is there a work plan? How do you want to achieve this? By who? For who? With what budget? So our GIZ colleague in the back asked a very interesting question, and I know it has not been answered, so maybe by the end of today, but I did a little bit of Googling while sitting here, and I can't find that much yet about the Center of Excellence, and I'm really super interested, also because it sounds like you have a great team of partners here, and the ideas are extremely interesting and extremely good, but they are quite similar to the ideas that were behind the Climate Technology Center network that is currently based in Copenhagen. It's also quite similar to some of the initiatives that we've done with our adaptation programs in the UN Environment in Nairobi. Why do we need another center? Maybe that is because the others didn't succeed fully. Although we had the same objectives, why did they not succeed? So I would be super interested to see what your work plan is, or if it's still on the development, maybe to be like part of contributing to this.
I see someone who has all the answers.
I'd be very interested in seeing our own work plan as well. So we chose to be very open in this phase. We are growing up in public. You know, we could have chosen to present ourselves as a finished product. We chose to not do that and be open to all of these kind of questions. About the means, we keep to the Netherlands may be able to provide the core funding for this, which caters for housing and general staff and things like that. But we are very much open to and looking for collaborations to do, you know, chunks of work on metrics or on this or on that or on that. So we are definitely looking into that. The way that we'd like to cooperate with networks is that we add value to what they are already doing. So by definition, we will not step into other men's mandate. For example, the CTCN is a very clear mandate. It needs every support that they can get, and they will get it also from the Netherlands and from many other countries in developing and delivering technical assistance to developing countries. So we've already talked with them. They were also here. We went to Copenhagen specifically to talk to UNFCCC and to CTCN and ask how can we contribute to your practice. And there are numerous ways of doing that. So the center could provide assistance to CTCN so CTCN can scale up their work. That could be one of the ways of doing it. And would you allow me to react to one other question? It was on the network of centers. That's an excellent idea. We are actively looking to creating, say, satellites of this center, as we are open to be a satellite of other centers. For example, there is a Center of Excellence on Sustainable Development of Small Island Developing States. I will keep it short, you can have dinner. Based in the Caribbean, we will be their satellite, and they will be our satellite. So I definitely understand the necessity of having a network of centers.
Thank you. I hope that answered some of your questions. As I said in the beginning, we're also in the mode of asking questions, so and getting suggestions, and I think we harvested quite a few here. Christian noted something else, and I picked up the word dinner, and that is important as well. It's good to see there are more questions in the room. I would like to ask you one thing now, and that is, if you leave this room, when you leave this room, you will hopefully kind of reflect on what you have heard this evening session, and you will talk to others, maybe over dinner or a drink, and say, well, that's never going to happen because it won't work because they haven't thought of that. Please bring it up here and not at the dinner table, because it would help us and the people setting up the center. So who, and I'm afraid some of the people may have left already with exactly those points, but who in the room would like to give some final advice to the people? Yes, please. Can someone throw the mic to the back?
All right.
Or throw it to someone in the middle, and they might. Yes, there you go. He's a good catcher. There you go, please.
My name is Sabr Osman. I'm working for the Ministry of Environment in Egypt. And actually, my advice will be on the issue of planning and finance. Because we started actually to work since a long time in issues related to climate change, vulnerability, and adaptation. We have a lot of information and studies. However, when we look on the implementation side, you will find that it's not actually equal to the information and data that we have. That's why we started just last year to think about where is the gap, why we are not progress in the implementation. And we highlighted that we are not working with the Ministry of Planning and Ministry of Finance in our country. That's why we started to involve them. And we started to have a kind of protocol for cooperation to see how can we advance in issue of having indicators. We should change our finance methods and to have like codes for looking up for the budget that we spent on the issues related to climate change adaptation or even mitigation.
Thank
This
you.
is my advice. Thank you.
That's valuable advice as well. With that, unless someone else has advice before leaving, here, final word to you.
I have a question, a little bit silly also question about if you have a network for the whole world, why don't you just concentrate on the most urgent climate change and the worst scenario in the certain area and start with this to avoid maybe time and money for each country to do a climate change strategy, make the most crucial area to cover. And instead of all the worlds to lose their money and time for these
May I interpret this as advice to start with the most vulnerable?
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Then I erase the question mark. It saves time. Thank you for that last point. Let me finish with that one. And I think you made it full circle, ending up with those people that do need the kind of excellence that we're looking for here. Let me thank you for your attendance and joining us indeed in this conversation. We weren't able to adapt the room, something we tried before we started thinking about how to organize this. It's better to talk about something that is in development when you sit in a circle and you can see each other in the eyes. It did work out in the end. I thank you very much for your engagement and for the questions and suggestions and other remarks that you made. Very valuable, I say, on behalf of the people that are working, developing the center. What you do get now, and they are distributed from the back, and maybe some of you have those already, is a little folder on where the center stands now, just this little A4. At the bottom of the back, you find 2 email addresses. Come up with second thoughts. If you have those remarks that I just suspected that you may have them, questions that you didn't dare to ask, people on the other side of those email addresses are patient and they are eager to learn as well. So please use that. Stay tuned. I mentioned that later on this year at COP23, there will be another event, and most likely that will be the official launch. Yes, an affirmative nod here. So there will be some festivities there as well. And maybe we can even share some good practices or lessons learned at that occasion already. So once again, thank you for attending. Thank you for participating. And we hope to see you again. Thanks. Sorry, I didn't get your